I had had a pregnancy scare. I want a baby. We tried to conceive her when I was a teenager.
Don't you know that you're beautiful, just the way you are, just the way you can.
Hi guys, welcome back. If you are new here, click the subscribe button. Today I am doing a story time for you guys. I haven't done one of these in a really long time, so bear with me, but this is a story that I've actually gotten a lot of questions on because it's literally how I started my channel. I tried to become a teen mom. If you can call me that. Yeah, I was technically a teen mom and I did try for my first baby as a teen. In light of my daughter's birthday being in 1 month, which is just so crazy, I wanted to tell the story of how we tried to conceive her when I was a teenager. I want to put this disclaimer out here that I am in no way glamorizing teen pregnancy. I am also in no way shaming teen moms. This is just my story and how this ended up for us and how we actually tried for our first baby when I was 19 years old. So some people might call me a teen, some people might call me not a teen. Obviously, like, I was technically a teen, so I just wanted to kind of go over that. But I wanted to start from the very beginning. My husband and I met in 2016. I had just graduated high school and we literally started dating like the week after I graduated high school. So we started dating. I want to kind of do an entire story on like how we actually moved in together, because we moved in together after a month, almost 2 months of knowing each other and after almost 2 months of dating. So it's kind of a long story. I actually talked about it on my Instagram, so if you guys don't follow me, definitely do, because I talk about so much type of stuff on there. But I did talk about how I got kicked out of my house at 18 years old. Brayden and I were dating at the time and got kicked out of my house, and we started looking for an apartment together. So we moved in after less than 2 months of dating, and in October of that year, I had had a pregnancy scare. So we were not trying at this time. I was on birth control pills at the time, and I had been on birth control pills since I was 16 or 17, I can't remember, but I had been on birth control pills for a very long time at that point. And so during the month of October, we had a lot going on, and there was a couple days where I literally forgot to take my pills. If you know nothing about birth control pills, if you forget to take your birth control pills, they will not work, so obviously. And so I had a pregnancy scare that month. We were not trying at all. And in fact, I was so terrified that I was pregnant. So what had happened was I kept getting symptoms. Turns out I had just had the 24-hour flu, but I puked all day long, and I'm like, I think I might be pregnant. Like, I was having kind of those pregnancy symptoms that you always hear about, like morning sickness and all of that type of stuff. So I was having those types of symptoms, and come to find out it was just the 24-hour flu. But I'm like, I think I might be pregnant. I missed a couple pills of my birth control, and it had been pretty much like all month. Like, I would miss like 1 a week at least, maybe like 2 a week. And so I was just not very good at taking my birth control pills that month for some reason. We had like a lot going on. We went on like this big long trip and stuff like that. So just stuff like that kept happening. But I'm like, we need to take a test. For about, I want to say it was about 2 days, 2 or 3 days, I want to say, I had it in my head that I was pregnant. And I'm like, I think I might be pregnant. And then over those 2 or 3 days before I took a test, because obviously I wanted to wait until I missed my period, and pregnancy tests are freaking expensive. I didn't want to just go out and buy some when I was too early to test. So I waited until I missed my period, and I missed my period technically. So how it was I was taking my birth control pills every 3 months is when I would have a period, and I was literally in the middle of not having a period. Everyone's like, just stop your birth control pills, and it's like, well, if I'm not pregnant, I don't want to stop my birth control pills, you know? So I go through 2 or 3 days like thinking that I am pregnant, and as the 2 or 3 days is progressing into me taking a test, I'm kind of getting excited. And it was kind of like an okay feeling with it. It was like, if I'm pregnant, okay, we'll deal with that, blah, 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 blah. So I took the test I want to say it was the end of October. I want to say it was like the 28th or so of October. And so I took a test that day and it came up negative. And I didn't realize it at the time that I was kind of becoming okay with being pregnant. And I remember looking at that negative test and being like, whoa, I thought I was pregnant. Like I started to become okay with the fact of being pregnant. At first it was scary because obviously we weren't trying. We hadn't even had that talk yet. But then I took that test and it was negative, and I just sat there and stared at it for, it felt like the longest time that I just sat there and stared at it. But I just sat there and stared at it, and all of a sudden this big rush of feeling came over me. I want a baby. This is what I wanted. Growing up, I really didn't want kids. I didn't like kids. I think it's other people's kids that I didn't like, but obviously I didn't know that for myself. And then I got diagnosed with endometriosis, and knowing that like it took my mom almost 10 years to get pregnant with my brother, and having a really hard time getting pregnant with him, and then like all of us have endometriosis, so it just runs in our family. And so like it kind of just got me thinking, like, I do want a family, I do want babies, I do want to be a mom. And so with having endometriosis over the last couple years before we started trying, I just kind of wanted that, and that was really the clarification that I needed, was the negative pregnancy test when I thought I was pregnant. It was just kind of like this surreal feeling that was like, I didn't know that I wanted this. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted it that time either, and I didn't know that I was ready. But over those 2 or 3 days that I really thought I was pregnant before I took a test, I didn't realize it at the time, but after I took that test, I'm like, I became okay with the fact of having a baby. Like, I kind of was excited to have a baby, and then, you know, it came back negative, and that threw me for a loop. My husband and I, my boyfriend at the time, we were not married. We started talking, and I said, I want to try for a baby. And, you know, it took a lot of convincing for him. He had already had a daughter at that time from a previous relationship. It took a lot of convincing for him, and for about 2 weeks. So I started my period. When I was going through those 2 or 3 days, I stopped taking my birth control because I'm like, well, I don't want something to happen with the baby. Like, if I am pregnant, you know, all of those types of things. I didn't know what I know now. I stopped taking my birth control. My period was supposed to start, and if you've ever been on birth control, then especially if you had just been taking it every 3 months to have a period, then you would know that it's kind of impossible for your body to actually start a period, because it kind of, the birth control triggers your period essentially. I eventually started my period. I think it was like the beginning of November. So my birthday was the beginning of November. November 9th is my birthday. And so I was literally 18 when I thought I was pregnant. So it took a lot of convincing for Brayden to really get on board with this. And so I started my period and everything, and by the time I was ovulating, he was on board, and he was like, you know, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But he was just kind of like, let this be in God's hands right now. We weren't like trying. In my mind, we were trying, but not for him. He's just kind of like that person that's just like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it's in God's plans, then it will happen, and blah, 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 blah. So we went through November, and my first month trying was really, really rough. I had ovulated and everything. This was my first ovulation without birth control, and it was very painful. It was very, very hard. So if you guys don't know, I have endometriosis, and I can actually feel when I ovulate. It's very, very painful for me. It's kind of like giving birth, but in my ovaries. I ovulated and everything, went to take a test because I was supposed to start my period. I took a test and it came back negative. I had probably taken 2 tests that month, I want to say. And I want to say I took a third, and like it came in like a 2-pack thing, and I took a third, and it came back negative as well. And that was really hard. Like, I remember sitting there with the pregnancy test. Brayden had just gotten home for his lunch break. I'm like sitting there crying, and he walks in and he's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "We're not pregnant." I didn't realize like how hard it was to get negatives. Like, I had never gotten a negative before when we were trying, because obviously that was the first month. But yeah, so then my period is supposed to come, and my period doesn't come. So I call up my doctor and I said, "Hey, like, this is the second month that my period has been late. I am not pregnant. I took a test." And they were like, "Okay, so I'm gonna prescribe you some medicine that's literally going to trigger your period." And so I'm like, okay. I get off the phone, which is just the weirdest thing. I get off the phone, and about an hour later I start my period. Didn't even have time to get the prescription. It probably wasn't even filled at that point, but I started my period. And so I started my period on December 1st. And so we went through December. I ovulated, and let me just tell you, that ovulation pain was the worst ovulation ever. And I have a theory about this, that when I'm off of birth control pills for 2 months, it kind of triggers my body to release a really good egg, and I get pregnant. I remember thinking during that ovulation, if we don't get pregnant this cycle, I'm getting back on birth control because I can't do this anymore. That ovulation was the worst, and it is every single time I conceived both of my kids. It was just one of those things that was like really, really, really hard for me. I remember thinking that, like, if we're not pregnant, I'm getting back on birth control. We're stopping trying. I can't handle this pain anymore. If you've ever had endometriosis ovulation, you know how painful it is. It was excruciatingly painful. So we had actually ovulated on the 17th of December, so it was a couple days before Christmas. Christmas comes and goes, and I think I was supposed to start on like the 28th of December. Obviously, knowing that the last 2 months I hadn't really started my period on time, I didn't really think much of it. I'm like, oh, it's gonna start. I had no pregnancy symptoms, like the usual pregnancy symptoms, and I literally had nothing. And I'm just like, oh, my period is just late. Like, I was kind of over it at that point, which is so sad, because like with my son, I tried for an entire year. And it's just kind of weird how like at the 2-month mark, I'm like, I'm done trying. My period comes and goes. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't have any pregnancy symptoms. And eventually I was talking to my best friend at the time. We're no longer friends, but I was talking to my friend at the time, and I'm just like, she had actually announced to me that she was pregnant. We had a falling out in November, and she actually started talking to me when she got pregnant again. And she messaged me on like the 1st of January, and she was like, "I'm pregnant, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, congratulations." 5 days goes by, and January 5th happens. We are talking, and something just comes over me. I can't even explain to you that feeling. I've heard so many people say this too, that they just got this feeling rushing over them to take a test. And at the time I was just like, I'll take a test, whatever, it's not going to be positive. I even told my friend this, and I'm like, I'm going to just go take a test. So what happens was, I took the test. I completely forget about it, because I'm just like, oh, it's totally negative. Like, what's the point of even looking at the test? Like, it's just going to be negative. And something came over me and was like, go check the test. Go check the test. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna go check the test. It's gonna be negative anyway. What's the point? But I'm just gonna go check the test. It was so crazy, because I've heard so many people say this exact same thing, that like something just came over them to go check the test. And that's exactly what happened with me. So I went to go check the test, and I remember looking down on our bathroom counter. I will actually insert like a couple pictures right here. This was in our first apartment, and I remember looking down at the counter and just being like, whoa, what is that? Like, I was in shock, you guys. Like, when I tell you I was in shock to the point where I couldn't say anything. Like, I I just couldn't believe that it already happened. I couldn't believe that that month was the month that we conceived. Like, I couldn't believe that I was pregnant. It was so easy. And like, knowing what I know now about my son and trying for him for an entire year, it was really, really hard to try for him. And I will actually, like, if you want to see my TTC journey with my son, I will link a video. But I was in complete shock when I saw that. I wish I was on YouTube at that time, because I would have pulled out my camera, said like, I'm taking a test. I wish so badly I had that reaction on camera. I love seeing my reaction with my son. It was an incredible day and like an incredible video, and I just love that video so much, and I just wish I had that with my daughter. But yeah, it was just one of those moments that I will never forget. So I had just turned 19, and it was a month after I turned 19 that I got pregnant, and it was just insane. So I got tried for a baby at 19, I got pregnant at 19, and I had her at 19. And so I was literally 2 months away from my birthday when I gave birth to my daughter, and so I was still 19. It's just such a surreal experience to be able to try for a baby at 19 with endometriosis and conceive. It's just something that I never thought would happen. You know, when your parent has a hard time getting pregnant, when they have endometriosis, and you just kind of pinpoint that to you, like, oh, it's gonna take me 10 years. I did not think it was gonna take 2 months. I didn't think that in the slightest. I thought it was gonna be easier than it was. I didn't think that I was gonna get so upset over negative tests, because I'm just like, you know, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't, you know. And I didn't think that it was going to be so hard to try to have a baby, and it was for both of my kids. It was so incredibly hard to try for both of my kids, and it's just so surreal. I can't believe that was 3.5 years ago. It's just one of those things that, like, I will never forget. I also have a couple questions that you guys have asked me over the years. I have kind of compiled them into like a Q&A thing on my phone. Someone says, do you regret trying as a teenager? No, I do not. I also do not regret having babies young. I've gotten that question a lot. They're like, oh, you're gonna regret it having kids so young. And I don't at all. Like, I love my kids to death. I would jump in front of a bullet for them, and that kind of love you're not gonna find with anything other than a child. It is so true what people say when they say having a kid shows you a different kind of love. It is so incredibly true. Another person says, why did you try it so young? So obviously, like, I have endometriosis. My clock is ticking a lot faster than a normal person without fertility issues would have. You know, we did conceive both of my kids naturally, but it was not easy in the slightest. You know, it's one of those things that it's hard to kind of comprehend the fact that you have endometriosis. You might not conceive, you might conceive naturally, you might have to do IVF because you have this fertility issue. I am so incredibly blessed and happy that I was able to conceive both of my kids naturally with endometriosis. And it's just one of those things that I will just like never forget, you know. But yeah, I don't regret having kids young. There's a reason that we started trying when I was a teenager. I don't think everyone's plan has to go according to how other people see you or how other people see their 20s or their teenage years, like all of this types of stuff. I got told so many times, just enjoy your 20s, just enjoy your 20s, and I am. And a lot of people say your life is over when you have kids, but for me, my life had just begun when I had a kid, you know, when I got pregnant, my life really started. I didn't lose my 20s or my 19th year by having a kid. It just became different. It just became more blissful, and I don't regret it for one single second. It was truly the best thing that could have ever happened to me, and the best thing that we could have ever hoped for and prayed for, and I love it. It's not for everyone, honestly. Like, go ahead and have your kids in your 30s, but for me and for our situation, like, I wouldn't have it any other way. It was just an incredible experience, and like, I just love it. And so, no, I will never regret having a kid young. I will never regret trying for my kid as a teenager. I don't really consider myself a teen mom because we were financially stable. We tried for her, and you know, like, we were financially stable. We lived in an apartment together. Like, we were responsible adults at that time. And so, but anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you are a teen mom, definitely leave your stories down in the comments. I love reading your guys' stories. Or if you were just a young mom in general, definitely leave your stories below. I love hearing them. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye, guys.
Don't you know that you're beautiful? Just the